Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jack's Corner. I'm your host, Tarzan Bonanno, and with me, as always, is our founder, Jack Figgle. Today, we're doing the second part of this unknown how many parts series of his papal audiences. So, Jack, you said that this one goes back to 2004?
Yes, that's right. Hello, Tarzan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to him forever.
Um, yes, this is from 2004, and it was actually my third face-to-face encounter with Saint Pope John Paul II. I don't know. Have you heard, Tarzan, whether it's appropriate to call him Saint Pope or Pope Saint?
It's usually Pope Saint.
Pope Saint?
Yeah,
Oh,
Pope
okay.
Saint John Paul II, because he was
Okay.
Pope and now he is Saint. So it's
Saint.
Pope Saint John Paul II,
Okay.
or just
I
JP2.
Yeah, that's what I use. I mean, but if I'm writing it out, it'd be nice to know what I should be writing properly.
Yeah, I had to write something for a teaching thing that I was doing, and when I handed it in for not reflection, but like they went over it, they gave it back to me, and where I had forgotten to put Pope or Saint, they wrote Pope Saint next
Okay.
to it. Everywhere. I'm like, okay, thank you.
I thought it might have been the other way around, that whatever was the most prestigious came first. In other words, Saint Pope. But
I don't know. That's what I'm
anyway,
used to. In the comments, let us know.
yeah. All right. So, yes, this was a trip in 2004. So now almost 20 years ago. It was November. And it was in celebration of my 50th birthday. So that means if you add 20 years, I'm coming up on 70 later this year.
Happy
But
much early birthday.
yes, not till November. Uh, anyway, so I organized a trip for myself and Father Ray Collins, um, and Monsignor George Dobes, for all of us to go visit um, Pope St. John Paul. And uh, as part of that trip, I arranged to do a few other things sort of along with it. Uh, the first was actually to stop off in England on our way to Rome, because the most efficient flights went to, in terms of pricing, went through London, and so I booked us flights from Washington to London, and then spent a few days there. Visited an old business friend of mine, and then we got on the flight to Rome from there. When we got to Rome, we stayed, the three of us, at a place uh, called the Hotel Santa Ana, which is about 2 blocks walking distance to the Santa Ana Gate, which, if you're looking at St. Peter's, it's on the far right-hand side, over close to where you go for the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican museums. But it's one of the two main gates that you go in to actually get into the Vatican itself and into Vatican City. And the uh, street that comes out of the gate is called Santa Ana, and 2 blocks away is the hotel. So by picking that place, we were convenient to the Vatican and could get there walking distance without any trouble, and hardly took any time. So we didn't have to spend a lot of time with cabs and things going back and forth to other parts of Rome or whatever. We were right there. The other advantage of that little hotel was that it crossed with a street called the Borgo Pio, um, which I think translates into uh, Father Pio Road or highway or boulevard or road, street. But it's known as the Borgo Pio. And along there are a whole bunch of little family restaurants and a whole bunch of little religious goods gift shops. So it's a great place for tourists. And uh, in fact, the one of the three other gentlemen on the trip, Archbishop Sevlud, bought a chalice set that was Byzantine in style from one of those, so that later in the week, when we had scheduled him to have a liturgy down in the crypt at the tomb of St. Peter, he would use that chalice set and it would have a special meaning for him. So he was able to find that within a block or two of the hotel. So it was a very, very convenient place. The first visit we made was to the residence of Cardinal Walter Casper, who at that time was the head of the Pontifical Council for Christian Unity. And he invited us to join him for just a little tea and cookies in the afternoon, the day we arrived, so that we could rest up a little bit with him and catch up on things. We had a lovely little conversation. We exchanged small gifts with him, and sort of talked about the status of ecumenical dialogue. And it was a very, very nice, pleasant visit with Cardinal Casper. What was interesting about it was we were in his residence. So, we sort of got to see what his apartment was like. And of course, it was all walking distance from where our hotel was. So it was real easy for us to get there. We then went to a ecumenical meeting that was taking place out near Castel Gandolfo, out in the country, out near the Pope's summer residence. And there were a whole bunch of church leaders from around the world who happened to be there that we were able to greet. We were not invited to the conference, but all these other people that were there, we knew, and so the Archbishop was able to greet all of them, and it was a very exciting experience to see all these people that we knew. Cardinal Casper, of course, was the head of the meeting, and since it was an ecumenical affair. But some of the others that we were able to greet was included Patriarch Gregorius of the Melkite Church. Now he's emeritus, he's retired. Also another retired bishop, Basil Loston of the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Connecticut, who's also retired. We also met Bishop Hlib Lochina of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, who at that time was the Ukrainian Catholic bishop for Italy, based in Rome. He's now, I believe, the Ukrainian Catholic bishop in Paris for Western Europe. Also, the retired cardinal who ran the Pontifical Council before Cardinal Casper, his name was Edward Cassidy, and he was from Australia, which is where Archbishop Sevlud grew up. So they had met each other a few times, but it had been a number of years since they saw each other. And so when they greeted, it was a very, very warm greeting. They were good friends, and it was really nice that he happened to be at that same gathering, so we had the chance to meet him. And then finally, one of the other luminaries that was there was at that time with the Assyrian Church of the East. He's now become Catholic, and he's now Chaldean Catholic bishop, I believe, in Canada, and that's Mar Bawai Soro. He's been an ecumenist for many, many years, and I think I talked about him last time as having joined us for dinner on the Archbishop's birthday when we had the previous audience with St. John Paul. Mar Bawai was there, but he was also at this meeting out in the country. Another luminary who I didn't get to greet personally, but sat with Archbishop Sevlod in the audience of this gathering was Metropolitan John Zazoulis, who I recently passed away and was the Orthodox co-chair of the International Dialogue the last 10 or 12 years. And he was at this meeting way back in 2004, so almost 20 years ago. There are other bishops from other churches of the Middle East, and so it was a great opportunity for us to greet them all at that gathering. When we came back to Rome, the next morning, we had an appointment to go visit Cardinal Cachavian, who had been papal nuncio in Washington for many, many years. And he was very, very friendly. He was now retired in Rome. And so we went and met him at his residence. Then we also went to tour other of the basilicas of Rome. So we got a little touring in. And then we went to the Congregation for the Eastern Churches, or the Oriental Churches. And the head of that at the time was an Eastern Catholic, for a change. Most of the heads of those congregations are Roman Catholics. But at that time, it was Cardinal and Patriarch Daoud of the Syriac Catholic Church. And so we visited with him, exchanged gift, and had a little chit chat. So that one day we were able to meet and greet quite a number of people involved in the ecumenical dialogue and heads of the churches, because they were in town for all that. The next morning, we had made arrangements for the Archbishop to celebrate a liturgy at the tomb of St. Peter, as we had the previous trip. But this time they gave us an altar that was closer to the tomb, but it was not visible. The way they had the excavations done, the main altar that we were at the first time around had a glass door that you could actually see into the crypt and the tomb of St. Peter. This year, they gave us an altar that was around the backside that they said was physically closer to the tomb, but you couldn't see it because of the walls. So it was just a small little altar space. And it was the Archbishop with the two others that went with us on this particular trip. One was Father Raymond Collins, who was the former dean of the School of Religious Studies at the Catholic University of America here in Washington. And he had been a strong supporter of the Oriental Lumen conferences and co-sponsored it when we started in 1997. So this is now 7 years later. I invited him to join us on the trip to meet St. John Paul. And the other that went with us is a Monsignor George Dobes, who's a Roman Catholic who lives here in Arlington, is a retired Navy chaplain. He was a captain when he retired. His career was with the Navy, with the fleet. He'd been on carriers and been the chaplain at various naval bases around the world. But he settled down and retired here to Washington, went to canon law school, was a good friend of mine, helps out my parish, and is also involved in the Oriental Lumen conferences for many, many years. So he joined us. So that was the four of us that were on the list to go to the private audience with St. John Paul. So in the morning, we went to the crypt and had the liturgy. And then later in the morning was our appointment with the Pope. And so we just walked up the stairs and waited in the anteroom until our appointment time. And at first, the Pope met with the Archbishop first, sort of in a private meeting. And after they had a discussion for 10 or 15 minutes, then Monsignor George, Father Raymond, and I were escorted in. And I had brought 3 bound leather editions of the Eastern Church's Journal. In my first meetings with St. John Paul, I brought the previous Eastern Church's journals with me as my gift. And now I brought the 3 latest editions. And the Pope gave me a little memento. I think it was a red container with a rosary inside. The last time, if you recall, I talked about getting a medallion that was numbered. This time it was a rosary, which is also still, cherished. But unfortunately, this was now 2004, and so it was about 6 months before the Pope died. And so he was in pretty bad shape physically. It was really kind of sad to see him. He was sitting in a chair, and we came up to greet him. You sort of had to grab his hand and pick it up in order to kiss his ring. He could not speak, so you could speak to him, but he couldn't respond. The only thing you could really see was his eyes glistening, that he could hear and understand what you were saying, and it was certainly seemed like he was very happy to see us. But his physical condition was really kind of sad. So it's one of those memories I have of, I was honored to be with him and in his presence, but it was more of a sad occasion for me than it was a joyous one, because of how poor his health was, and that he was struggling to stay in the pontificate and go through the motions of what he was supposed to do, even though he was so ill. In fact, it was so bad that when it came time, we had brought bags of rosaries and icons and things for him to bless, for us to take home as gifts, that the Monsignor looking after him had to come over and take his arm and actually move his arm to give the blessing over the things we brought. So it was a bit sad. But one of the things that took place while Archbishop Всеволод was with him privately was that the Archbishop brought him the Panagia, or the bishop's medallion, that we had made custom for the first Oriental Lumen conference that was held in Istanbul a few years before. It was specifically designed and crafted by a jeweler and church goods supplier in Athens, that was referred to me by the Ecumenical Patriarchate's office. And we designed a unique medallion. This one was called an Engolpion rather than a Panagia, because it was an image of St. Peter and St. Andrew rather than an image of the Mother of God. So the bishop medallion that's the Mother of God is called Panagia, which means as wide as the heavens. And Engolpion, I guess in Greek, means just a medallion, or the bishop's special badge of office. Also, we designed this one to be sort of on the triangular side, that would fit better with the icon of the 2 brothers embracing. And the model we used for the artist was the icon that Athenagoras gave Paul VI, that hangs at the Pontifical Council for Christian Unity, that everyone's seen around the world, of the 2 brothers, embracing each other, that is usually used to symbolize Christian unity. So when we had them made for that Oriental Lumen conference a few years before, we made 12 of them. We gave one to Patriarch Bartholomew, I think we gave one to Patriarch Gregorius, who was there at the time for that conference, and a few other bishops and cardinals, but we reserved one so that if we ever had an audience with the Pope, we'd be able to give it to him. And so that's what the Archbishop did, was present that to St. John Paul. And in return, St. John Paul gave to the Archbishop a pectoral cross, like a Roman bishop wears. And although I was not in the room at the time, we have photographs that were taken by the Vatican photographer of the Pope actually putting the pectoral cross around the Archbishop's neck and bestowing it on him directly. And I think that was probably a fairly unique event in history to have the Pope actually put a pectoral cross on an Orthodox bishop. So it was a very, very special time. The Archbishop of blessed memory, he passed away a few years ago. I think really enjoyed that particular audience that we had arranged. After the audience, we went out and had some lunch, and then we made a few more sightseeing trips to the Ukrainian Catholic College of St. Josephat up on the Gia Nicolo. We had lunch with them and met with their seminarians and some of the faculty. And at the time, there was a Ukrainian Catholic Archbishop Marusin, who was working in the Oriental congregation. He lived there at St. Joseph's, and so he hosted us for lunch. Then that evening, I think it was a Saturday, so that evening there was Vespers in St. Peter's, and the Pope was presiding. And again, his health was such that they wheeled him in on a big platform, so he was already seated in a chair. It was not even a wheelchair. It was a nice big stuffed chair, but it was on a custom platform with big wheels on it. And they wheeled the whole platform in for him to come and preside at Vespers. So we were there, and they gave the Archbishop a seat all by himself at the same rank or position as the other cardinals who were there. So they really gave him a wonderful place of honor for that Vesper service. The next morning, Sunday morning, we were invited by Archimandrite Robert Taft from the Oriental Institute, and who was rector at the time of the Russicum, the Russian college. We were invited to join him for Sunday morning liturgy in St. Anthony's Church, which is the church next to the Oriental Institute and the Russicum. And again, the Archbishop was given all honors of a bishop. He was actually even seated in the sanctuary behind the icon screen, and that in the Russian recension or the Russian liturgical tradition, when a deacon or a priest almost says every line in the liturgy, they always bow to a bishop who was present, sort of to get his blessing for what they just said. And Father Taft had everyone that was concelebrating with him around the altar do the same with this Orthodox Archbishop. So they were giving him the full respect and treatment that a bishop would receive for that liturgy. Of course, when it came time for the kiss of peace at the creed, Archbishop Всеволод walked up to the front of the altar, and Father Taft turned, and they greeted each other, and then all the concelebrants around the table greeted the Archbishop as well, in addition to Father Collins and Monsignor Doves. They all exchanged a kiss of peace with the Archbishop. After liturgy, we went up and relaxed a bit with Father Taft in the library of the Oriental Institute, had lunch with him, and visited with some of the students. And then in the evening, we went out to dinner with Bishop Plivlochina, the Ukrainian Catholic bishop who was living in Rome at the time. And the Archbishop, Bishop Liv, Father Ray, and myself all had dinner one evening before we left. Because we had stopped in London on the way over, we also stopped in London for an overnight on the way back. But this time, we made arrangements for a very special audience that I've never done before then or since then. And that was, we went to Lambeth Palace and had an audience with Archbishop Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in downtown London. And for that audience, we invited Metropolitan Callistos from Oxford to come join us. So we drove to Oxford first, met the Metropolitan for lunch, and then we took the subway into London because driving in London is so difficult. From Oxford, it was a train. We talked from Oxford Station into London. Metropolitan Callistos knew exactly how to negotiate all around. And so we got to Lambeth Palace. We gave the Archbishop a book as a gift. It was Archbishop Vsevolod's book of writings, We Are All Brothers. And then Archbishop Rowan Williams gave us his book that he had written about the uncreated light of the Transfiguration. It was a spiritual reflection that he wrote about the East. It was a wonderful, friendly gathering of Metropolitan Callistos, Archbishop Vsevolod, Father Collins joined us, and myself. And Archbishop Rowan Williams was very, very gracious and very friendly, at that audience. In fact, he even personally walked us out the front door when we left and helped us find our way back to the train. We took the train at that point to Windsor instead of back to Oxford. And we had some spare time, and we went to Windsor Castle. So the three of us, Callistos, Vsevolod, myself, and we just walked around Windsor Castle for about an hour or so. And I have, I think, a relatively famous picture, and that is Archbishop Vsevolod was starting to have difficulty walking back then. And so they had wheelchairs available for handicap. So we took one of the wheelchairs, and at one point, I guess I was huffing and puffing or something. Anyway, Metropolitan Callistos took over and offered to push Archbishop Vsevolod in the wheelchair. And I had the presence of mind to snap a picture of the two of them so that I could blackmail one of them. I'm not sure which way to go. Now they both passed away, so I can't do that. But anyway, I have a picture of Callistos pushing Vsevolod around and inside of Windsor Castle. The other reason we went to Windsor was we had a wrap-up dinner on that last evening where I invited two couples that I knew when I worked in London with the company I worked for. They were good friends that I'd kept in touch with through the years. And so with them, Father Ray, Metropolitan Callistos, and Archbishop Vsevolod, and myself, and the four of them, we had 8. And we all went out for a nice dinner at a place called Inn on the Bridge. And it's on the walking bridge that crosses the Thames River right in sight of Windsor Castle. And it's a real nice sit-down, fancy kind of restaurant place. And it was there that we celebrated my 50th birthday. So we had that was my 50th birthday party, and it turned out we were there on the day of my birthday. And so it was great being with friends and having the two uh, archbishops with us, and having my worlds meet each other, the church world and my business world, all sitting at the same table. So it was quite a wonderful ending to that trip. And then I think the next morning we then got the flight back to Washington. So that was sort of an extended trip. We made a number of visits and audiences and events, in addition to a farewell audience that we had with St. John Paul.
Wow. Sounds like a lovely trip. Um, One thing that just it made me think of obviously we have ties to Pope St. John Paul, but the way you were describing seeing him the final time reminded me of my dad does martial arts, and he had one final opportunity to meet the master of Seidokan in Japan, and my mom let him take it because it fell on their anniversary. But it was just like the way he described that was very similar to how you described what it was like seeing Pope St. John Paul for the last time, because he was on his last leg as well at the same when my dad went to go see the master of Seidokan.
Right.
So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I thought of when you were
Right.
talking
Yeah.
about
Those
that part.
those are really special times in your life that that I'll always cherish. And I'm fortunate that at the time I had the presence of mind to take lots of pictures.
Yeah.
So I have pictures of all these events of the people, and I'm in a few of them, but not many, because I was taking them all,
Yeah.
and every once in a while I'd have someone else snap the picture. But this is also the night. Well, 2004 was before the days of smartphones, so I
Mm-hmm.
think this was done with a digital camera back in those days. I was thinking about it the other day. I my parents started with the old black and white 4x6 film um, cameras in the 50s, and I have pictures of me, at 6 weeks old and 2 years old and all that. And then we graduated from that black and white to the Kodak Instamatic cameras in the 60s, and by the late 60s, I had done enough photography at school and with the Boy Scouts that my parents bought me a 35 millimeter camera with a lens that you could adjust and all that sort of thing. And then that gave way to the digital camera, where you took pictures and they were stored on a chip inside the camera. And that's now given way to the phone, where everybody takes pictures all the time. And you have thousands and thousands of pictures. I don't even know how many pictures get stored on a phone, and I don't know if you can ever run out of space. It seems like you could, but I guess the
Most
digital
people
circuitry.
just
I'm sorry.
most people just update the cloud storage.
Yeah, right. And so yeah, so now I'm taking all kinds of pictures of all sorts of things going on. So hopefully over time, someday, I'm going to put them all in a book and write stories about them.
Yeah. Well, that was sounds like a very fun trip, even outside of seeing Pope St. John Paul II. And I'm assuming you've wrapped up and
Yep.
you're all good to go. All right then. Well, that concludes this episode of the Papal Audiences of Jack Figgle. Uh, Thank you all for coming and listening, and we'll see you next week. God bless, and bye-bye.